Heute führt mich der Ortstermin in den Nordosten von Berlin, nach Hohenschönhausen, in das ehemalige Sperrgebiet des Ministeriums für Staatssicherheit der DDR. Das ist der Eingang des ehemaligen Stasi-Gefängnisses, wo Menschen gefangen, verhört, gefoltert wurden. Heute die Gedenkstätte Hohenschönhausen. Das ist allerdings heute nicht das Thema, sondern das Gebäude gleich gegenüber des ehemaligen Gefängnisses, der sogenannte OTS, der operativ-technische Sektor der Stasi. Heute ein großes Atelierhaus mit über 200 Studios. Ich bin hier, um heute den 1985 in Tiflis in Georgien geborenen Künstler Vajiko Chachkhiani zu treffen.
Yeah, this is one of the pieces that I'm still working on, and that's the idea was like to try to work on a sculpture and suggest the sculpture when it's not there. So it's again about this absent figure which is present, and there was one of the several objects I got, like handmade objects from the prison, and it was arranged and then it was a bit burnt, not wholly, not the whole thing, and then the shadow was scattered around, and then I'm taking the objects out. So in the end it has to be 7 or 8 of them, more like arranged in the space. Yeah, this piece called Subtle Intimacy, that was a performance which I did in 2012, and the essence was that there was a woman standing while her hair was stuck in a concrete block. And after 2 hours, another person cut it off. And that's what the sculpture stays after the performance and action. And yeah, the idea was to kind of deal with the attachment, like to be attached on something with your very intimate features, and then like when it's gone, when the performance is off, then there is an absence which suggests the presence of the person who was there. So that was the main idea of the performance, like to operate on. Here, this is another performance piece called Father, which was in 2014 in Siegen. And the performance was, there was a father actually who has kids, and while sitting for 5 hours during the opening, and then afterwards it had to be broken out, and that's the piece which stays a sculpture with like the negative sculpture of the 2 holes and a chair and a concrete block, which again suggests on the like the presence of the absent person. Okay, this piece called Moment in and out of time, and that's the door which I collected in a prison, and that's the door of the solitary confinement chamber, where like, and the peephole is filled with the wax. That's the candles I found in the prison as well. And the idea was to show like the whole history which this door contains. You see it has like even bullets on it, and like some kicks from outside and inside, and like the idea was to find the way to find the empathy to the prisoners who were sitting inside, because it's always gets a bit tough for the prisoners from the police side. And this piece is called The Missing Landscape, and that's the section of the trees which I transported from Georgia, and they were like in the landscape, were in a forest which was burned during the war in 2008, and then transported, and the installation is on the roof of Bundeskunsthalle, and yeah, the idea of like the transporting from like this landscape and changing the place of the burned trees, which kind of for me are like the dead lives, which are out of the actions of human beings, and which is in the end the human nature to always be in the processes of those kind of actions. Yeah, this piece called "I Warned You, There Are Wolves Hereabouts," and it contains of soil and plants and hidden objects inside. And like essential part of the sculpting is that under there are those objects which has like existential meaning in the end, and it was collected from the people who are like individuals who had committed something with those objects. And the idea is that it's an ongoing project. The plants grow the roots over those objects, and after like 3 years, the shape of the sculpture will be changed, and like then it's going to be finished, the sculpture, when the roots are over those objects. So in the end, the sculpture, what we don't see, is the main idea. And this is a piece called "The Other Life," and a series of works which are 10. In the end, it has to be 10. It's already done 7 of them. And inside there are objects, and it's like secret realities, and anybody could destroy the sculpture if somebody signs the contract which gonna follow the instructions which are inside for the second life of the sculpture. And this is also from the same group of works, which consists of the fences I collected in abandoned village, from the abandoned house. And that's the church candles, which are not actually taken from the church, but like bought. But it consists also like 3 of the candles, which you see 2 on this fence. And 1 on the upper. It's the one which was taken from the church, which was burning, so it's kind of taken wishes and prayers. And the other one which is burning, it's the one which is located here down on this fence. So this triptych works that it involves a performative aspect of involving a person that always has to take 1 candle and burn it. So during the shows, it has always to burn 1 candle.
But in this part, the right twig is the real twig.
Yeah.
And the left one is a cast made from lead, I think.
Yeah. And the lead comes from the batteries, like car batteries.
Vajiko, when you came from Georgia to Western Europe as a young man, you first went to Amsterdam. I think you studied for a brief while at the Rietveld Academy, if I'm right. But then you went to Berlin in 2009, and you ended up at the UDK, the Universität der Künste, in the class of Gregor Schneider. What was the most important artistic experience in the class of Gregor, or to put it in an old-fashioned way, what did you learn from Gregor, if anything?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was very good for me to change from Amsterdam to Berlin to Klasse Schneider, because it was like environment was very serious, and like students were very serious about their work, and it was like very good atmosphere in that case, that people were working a lot, and things were getting as a like young student working and trying to understand what you're doing, getting a bit tough sometimes, which I think is very good as a school. And I think there were like what I've learned. I think I've learned a lot of things, in sense like to keep things very serious, and like to keep things tough, and to continue what you really are interested to do, and don't compromise for that. I think that was like the main.
And also the toughness of Gregor as a teacher was important, I understand. That he really put you in a place where you had to make a decision, where you had to do something yourself without telling you what to do.
Sure, yeah, it was never like that you have to do this or that, but more of the question which kind of leads you into the understanding like what you're doing, and if what you're doing has a strong feeling in it. And it was, I think that was a good, very good thing for a young student to be part of it, actually. Yeah.
To go one step back, actually, to your late teenage years, I understand, in Georgia, because for a while you've studied mathematics and informatics in Tiflis. Does this scientific background still has any kind of impact of your work as an artist?
Not
or how
really.
Do you feel about it?
No, I was never really interested actually in that field. It was just like the thing, like when I stopped my school, like elementary, not secondary school. Then was like the year that I went to, because I was a bit interested in like informatics and mathematics, but not so much to spend all my youth on that. So after 2 years, actually, I left. But there were some like things I think it's interesting, but I don't really involve in my work, because my work is actually based on something else, which is more like metaphysical rather than scientifical.
But what triggered your decision to leave science behind, to try to become an artist, and to leave Georgia behind for a while at least, to go to Amsterdam?
Yeah, the main reason actually to leave Georgia was like because you can't really make art studies, like to really kind of have a like atmosphere where you have a lot of different like inputs coming from a different like people, which I think is very important, because it's like art scene and like the art situation is a bit provincial.
You mean the art scene in Georgia and the art school is rather one-dimensional? There's only a limited choice of what you could do as an artist?
Yeah, very limited, I would say. Like, and as a young man, like when you're like 20 or something, I think it's very important to get somewhere where you have more serious people who are seriously interested in what they do, not like what they are doing. And I think that was the main reason to leave the city.
And why Amsterdam? It was a myth or something?
No, actually, it was really
good dope or whatever.
It was a coincidence, because I just sent just like that to the Rietveld Academy, and I got in and I just left. But then after 1 year, I was not really sure if it was the right place also for me, because it was also a bit different what I was expecting to get from the school at this moment. And then I've heard of like Schneider having a school in Berlin, and I think that was the best thing to try. And
so you have been aware of Gregor being a teacher in Berlin before?
Yeah.
And you've been aware of his work?
Sure.
You came across it? Yeah, sure, where?
In Amsterdam, because he was teaching in the Ateliers, I think.
Yes.
So that was because that was the reason I wanted to go at his, because I find his work good, so that was the...
And moving from Amsterdam to Berlin brought you a little bit further east again, which brings me to my next question, which is a most obvious question, but nevertheless I would like to ask you, how important is Georgia as your place of origin for your artistic concepts, your artistic work nowadays? Because you travel there time and again, you bring material from there, you go there next year, you told me, to do a film there. So is there something like a Georgian identity which is part of your artistic work, or is that overemphasizing the place of your origin?
I don't know, actually. It's a question of the raw materials, actually. I can have access there, which for me is very important, because like that's in the end, like all this last 20 years, Georgia is going through this like processing and forming the societies again after like some changes. They had like systematic changes. And I think therefore there are a lot of materials which are having a lot of potential to have if it will be arranged in a way very deep meaning. And that's the thing also, like when you see if I would do a fiction film, that's also like first film I think I would do in Georgia, because like environment is very cinematic too. Like you see, for instance, like stone workshop or something, which is very cinematic because, for instance, it has like the dust of 20 years on top, which was not cleaned in the stone workshop. Mm-hmm. So you have this beautiful set design. You don't need to design the set anymore. You can just rearrange a bit. And that's...
So could you say that your links with Georgia today, as being an artist now presently in Berlin, are more kind of pragmatic? Because of the history, the recent history of Georgia, because of what you said, the scenic landscape or scenic motives of certain objects and materials you like and you could more easily obtain there than in another place. It's not so much. It doesn't have so much to do with this concept of identity in the full meaning. It has more a pragmatic aspect, I understand.
Yeah, I think I don't work so much about the identity, and like I'm interested in like one section of like rite of passages, which is in the end like the kind of the passage when like identity from one identity changed into another one. That's like all this liminal like period, which I think is very interesting for me, and that's what I'm interested in to understand. But yeah, like that, mostly it's pragmatic, but also I have a certain feeling to like a certain situation. If I see it has a certain poetry or a beauty which has also its counter like effect, which could be like burned or abandoned or something which has already very existential like character without having humans inside, because what I'm interested in the end is like understanding the human psyche, the way it is kind of affected by the circumstances and historical and like political dimensions. And that's, I think maybe it's also very familiar when I see like, I don't know, like burnt forest. I have the idea like, okay, like that looks very strong, and it can have a potential to be more than just a burned landscape on the mountain, for instance. It could be rearranged and could give like more empathic feelings towards like the victims or like all those.
But although most of your works are objects, manipulated objects in one or the other way, or arrangements of objects, sometimes people come into your work. And I'm referring in particular to this one beautiful video called Life Track, which is a still basically of one person looking through a window. Could you say at the end of our little conversation a little bit about that video?
Yeah, that's a very important film for me, and it was filmed in Berlin, in one of the houses, which I can't really tell because the director had a problem to be filmed in this house. So we had to actually go with the protagonist into another.
It is an institution.
It's an institution, yeah. For the people who spend their like last period of life.
Oh, yeah. Ein Sterbehaus, we sometimes call it, yeah. Or Palliativstation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hospiz.
Yeah, it's and so we had to move, and that was occasion that I met this very, very strong person, Gossi, who is in the film, and he's living in this house, but like he still has so much vital force, and like living, and even though if the surrounding and the whole house, it's not so like vital in the end, because it has its own like conditions to don't be. He's really bringing the life inside there, and he has this like very big force to continue and always go on and do things, which you can see also in his eyes, and like you can see both sides, which is very important. And then you have the window which reflects the outside world, and the film is filmed from the outside inside, and this reflection of inner and outer, which is very important. And like in the end his eyes, and like 3 minutes when he's looking, which says a lot of things about life and death and all the